Good morning and welcome to What's Up with Power. My name is Justin Wagner with Team ODZ, and I will be your host today. We have a guest presenter, Nate Dunn from Data Driven Athlete, who's going to be joining us on the show and giving us a rundown on developing a power-based training plan. A lot of us struggle with, hey, I've done a few things, I've done some workouts, I've done some races, but I just kind of struggle to see the big picture. Struggle to kind of put together that whole plan as to what's going to take me to the next level. So Nate's going to give us some great tips and insights on how to do that. So I'll bring him here on the screen. How's it going, Nate?
It's going well. Good morning, Justin.
Great. So we are just 1 minute away from the group ride starting. So we'll hang here for just a little bit. So we get there. So you see Nate's got his hair nice and trimmed up. Looks like he got a haircut recently for us. So
I did, yeah. I went back to my wife cutting my hair. So she cut my hair for probably about 6 years, and we've gone back to that now. So
hey, it's great. I've done the same actually, and that's not why I'm wearing a hat. So
how's the shoulder, by the way? Have you got that all ironed out?
It's dangerously functional, and I have another appointment with the orthopedic doctor today to see where it's at. I've already done 91-mile ride outside on Saturday, so he'll have a hard time stopping me from the event this Saturday. But
so you're ready to jump into a crit then? That's
well, a crit might be a bit much, but a little dangerous. So
yeah.
So let's see here. Okay, I will toss it over to you. You just tell me how to run the slides, and we'll go from there, Nate.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for having me on this morning, Justin, and hello to the rest of the Team ODZ group. So today we'll be talking about developing a power-based training plan, and we'll be talking about some of those concepts. And then if you have any questions afterwards, you can type those in the comment box, and we can cover them as much detail and depth as you'd like at the finish. So let's go ahead and hop to the next slide. So to start off with, what I've kind of learned in my experience in coaching is that athletes love to plan, and this whole industry of coaching and of cycling magazines and websites and stuff like that, whenever a new season comes up, there's always this kind of push to make a plan and to kind of talk about doing a plan, give you tips about doing a plan. And we're going to have some of that today, but we're going to rewind it a little bit and talk more about what do you do before you even start making a plan, and what are kind of some of those foundational pieces to enable a successful plan. So we've talked about this before on some other presentations, but what we want to focus on are what are those ingredients that give us, long-term consistency and breed success over the long term, as opposed to, some of those specifics of building a plan. So like we said before, we can cover some of the nitty-gritty of planning, and if you have specific questions about how to apply this to your specific scenario, we can cover that after the show, or you can follow up with me afterwards and via email. So next slide, please. So these are the four kind of keys we're gonna be talking about this morning, and that is, first of all, answering this why train question, and then kind of looking at events and how to make sure that you're consistent by kind of filling out your calendar with events, assessing your time, and then how to apply progression and how to then prove that using data. So next slide, please. So the first kind of question that we come into here is answering this why train question. So before we kind of get into the business of making a plan, is to look, to sit down and to make a list and to say, why am I even interested in creating a plan? What is it about training that I'm interested in, maybe taking a larger step next season? What are the things that motivate me to get up in the morning and to even remain consistent throughout a plan? And ultimately, if you don't have a good answer, or if you don't have a set of good answers to this question, no matter how good your plan is, no matter how great it is utilizing data and other tools to kind of keep you on track, there's no way that you're going to be successful. And I've seen this with athlete after athlete, where oftentimes they begin coaching, they enjoy the process of kind of getting all their goals out there, establishing a plan, but then they don't have this foundation that keeps them motivated throughout the year. And that's what we want to start with. So first one, kind of answer this why train question. If we go to the next slide, we have this pyramid here. And for me, these are how I answer this why train question. So I enjoy riding with friends, and most of you know that, especially if you're riding outside, that you have more opportunities to ride with your friends if you're in better shape. So that's one of the first reasons for me why I like to train. I like to be competitive in races. The fitter you are, the more options you have in a race, and that's another way that I answer this why train question. I want to experience measurable progress. So that's an enjoyable part of the training process for me that I really enjoy. Some of the ones I didn't list on here, I want to establish an example of hard work that my kids can see. I want them to see me getting up early in the morning. I want them to see me working hard at something that I really care about. So, these are some of the answers that I have to that list in terms of why train. And those are the things that motivate me beyond the quality or beyond the details of the plan that I lay out for the upcoming season. So that kind of serves as the foundation. And then after you have that strong foundation of why you want to train, then we can begin to talk about how might we periodize a plan? How might we play with some of these variables of volume and intensity? How might we design workouts to identify, to further help you improve and to help you, bust through some plateaus. And then at the very top of that, how do we then taper and how do we kind of plan our training to be at our best on the day that matters? So you can see here in this graphic, start with that why train question, then we can begin to move on to some of those other details. So next question, next slide, please. So number 2, sign up. Now, what I've found with athletes is that no matter what their plan is, no matter what their motivations are, the greatest predictor of their success over time is they have a specific date on the calendar that they've signed up for an event. And it doesn't have to be an event. It might be a gravel grinder, it might be a race, but it could also be, hey, I'm going on this incredible tour with my friends, or maybe even this is the date where I want to try out this group ride for the very first time. So it doesn't have to be a formal event, but it needs to be something that you can pin on your calendar to a specific date and time. And that accountability of looking at your phone, looking at your calendar on a regular basis and seeing that event coming up in time can be a great way to maintain consistency and to help to constantly refresh those why train questions. Why am I training? I'm training because this event is on the calendar and I want to make sure that I can enjoy it more fully. So, having at least one date on the calendar, but preferably having dates stretched throughout your entire calendar is a really, really crucial ingredient to making sure that you remain consistent throughout the year. Next slide, please. So the third one, get really specific about assessing your time. Comb through every day of your week and map out how much realistic time you have to train. So I've done this in some other presentations, but look at a Monday and say, hey, on Mondays, I have only 10 minutes to train. On Tuesdays, it opens up a little bit. Maybe I've got an hour and a half after work that I have to train or so forth. So you can go through each day of the week and be really, really specific in breaking down exactly how much time you have to train. And the reason why this is so important before we jump into, further planning is that the amount of time you have to train is really going to dictate the type of workouts that you apply to your training. How might you play with volume and intensity? All those different types of planning procedures that we look at later are going to depend on the amount of time you have to train. And the more specific you are with that, then you can, better apply specific workouts to that time. So when I work with athletes, I tell them, hey, look, even if you have 10 minutes, even if you have 20 minutes, put that on the calendar for me. And then we have that option to look at and say, 10 minutes is enough time to get a quality workout that's going to make a difference in you maintaining consistency throughout the year. So no time is too little time to mark on your calendar. And when you undergo that process of really assessing your time, that can also help you, help to give further shape to your training plan over the course of the year. So also, be honest in balancing other life responsibilities. Oftentimes when I have athletes come and they do this process of putting down their time, and I look at that time and I never fill out that time with workouts right off the bat. I might give 2 months, of gradually working up to that time that they've told me that they have to make sure that that actually balances with the rest of their responsibilities in life. So, are you a parent? Do you have young kids? What's your work life? What's your work schedule life? So look at all those other things and err on the side of being conservative, especially when you're starting a plan. Err on the side of conservative and then open that up to more time as you've established that that amount of time you've actually written down is actually practical for you. So next slide, please. So the fourth one, this is when we start getting into a little bit more of the specifics of actually developing a plan. But whatever plan that you develop, however much time you have, make sure that you're applying this principle of progressive overload to your training. So this is kind of one of those keys of I'd say of training basics, and that is that when it comes to principles of getting better, if you want to get better over time, you're going to have to apply progressive overload to your training. And what that means in a real practical sense is whatever element it is that that you're utilizing of progression, you want to write that down in your training plan and you want to track it over time. So kind of going back to the previous slide in terms of assessing your time, whatever element of progression that you're using is probably going to be dictated by those elements of your training time, elements of your, of your personal environment there, and also, your personal preference. So if you're in an area where there's, a lot of rain throughout the year and you're stuck on the trainer, that's probably going to dictate that progressive element that you choose to move throughout the year. And we're going to highlight what some of those different progressive elements might be to kind of give a better example. So next slide, please. So these are some basic options that you might choose for a progressive element. So the most common one is going to be power at threshold, and we'll kind of have a graph to illustrate this. But so that might be, you start out and you're doing threshold intervals at 220 watts, and then you progress to 225, 230, right? So that might be an example of a progressive overload that might work if you're kind of stuck indoors. It might be the duration of that threshold power. So rather than increasing, the wattage that you're doing threshold intervals at, it might be that you begin to stretch the duration of those. So it might be that you start at 10 minutes and then you bounce to 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, all the way up, maybe working all the way up to 60 minutes. It might be number of 15-second sprints. So maybe you've identified in your training that you really want to try and improve your neuromuscular power, or maybe the repeatability of your neuromuscular power. And so that progressive element might be, well, I start out with 3 all-out 15-second sprints, and I'm going to progress over the course of 5 or 6 weeks, excuse me, all the way up into, maybe 10, 15-second sprints, right? Could be time and zone at VO2 max, total ride duration, weekly volume. What your progressive element might be that you're trying to lose weight, and you're trying to improve your your watts per kg primarily by losing weight. So whatever that is, make sure that you have that progressive element built into your training plan, no matter what time of the year it is. So whether or not that's, the base period or the build period or race period, you're always looking and tracking a progressive element that can help you focus on what am I doing? Am I getting better? Am I not getting better? Do I need to make adjustments to that training plan? So next slide, please. So this kind of gives you a visual representation of a very simple volume progression, right? So for this person, they're starting at, 6 hours a week. They're going up to 6 to 7 to 8, and then a rest, right? Build, 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 rest. So this is, probably your most classic example of a volume progression over time. And then you see here that as their volume continues to progress throughout the season, their power at threshold is also improving. So very basic kind of explanation or example of a volume progression. And the next slide, we see here, this person is kind of, their volume is capped at 8 hours. So their volume isn't going to be progressing during this period of their training plan, but they're going to be focusing primarily on, increasing their intensity through threshold workout. So again, we can talk about this more in depth if you've got questions after the show, but this gives you an example of this idea of a progressive overload and using, whatever element that you're using in your training plan and making sure that you track it. So, in addition to making sure that you're adding this progressive element, the next piece of that, sorry, we'll jump to that in just a minute. So the next slide here, a classic example of, so we talked about, volume progression, we talked about intensity progression, and then this is a progression that's showing a progression in training stress, right? So this might be another example of the progression that you're tracking. So I use this in very simple terms with a lot of athletes who maybe in the base period, we're not really looking at their volume, we're not really looking at their intensity, but we're looking at a sustainable progression in their CTL over time. So another example of, another area that you can track to show progression. So the next slide, what we were going to be jumping to here is that in addition to making sure you have a progressive element, you want to make sure that you're tracking that progressive element. So the performance manager chart that we looked at on the previous slide, that gives us an example of how to track our fitness or our CTL over time. And then this slide here gives us an example of how we're tracking different different power durations. So we have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes normalized power. That's what this custom chart is. And this is just showing us how we might track different power durations over time. So whatever that is, whether or not it's weight, whether or not it's volume, whether or not it's time and zone, don't just insert that element of progressive overload in your training, but make sure you're tracking it to assess the progress that you're making. So next slide, please. So just a quick summary kind of these basic pieces of building a training plan. First of all, write down these why train questions. More is better. If you can come up with a list of 5 different reasons why you train and kind of pin these onto your computer or whatever, these are the core elements that will enable you to get up in the morning or to get your kid on after work or whatever those kind of trouble spots for you are in terms of remaining consistent. These are the questions that these are the answers to that why train question that you can continue to come back to and be successful. Second one, sign up now for an event. Don't put it off. Go look, look, even if, some of those events aren't up yet, you can look at previous year's calendars and you can say, hey, generally over the past couple of years, this event has happened on this weekend. Put that on your calendar right now. You can revise it later, but at least you've got it on your calendar right now to kind of look at and to begin to see that perspective on what the next year looks like. Take a really close look at assessing your time. Break it out, be realistic, but write it down every day how much time you have. And then the final one that we just touched on is make sure that you have a progressive element to each period of your training and that you have some mechanism to be able to track that. So last slide, we're going to kind of jump into the question and answer session here. So if you have any questions about, the presentation that we just talked about, kind of some of these more general concepts, or if you have a question about how we might apply some of these concepts to your specific, training scenario, feel free to let those go, and I'd love to answer them.
Awesome. Okay, great. I'm gonna jump in here for the Q&A session, and I'm actually I have a comment or something I wanted to just. I really enjoyed your point about being honest with the amount of time you have to train and progressively taking whatever your progressive element is and slowly moving it forward. I think those things are vital no matter what point you're at, because obviously to improve something, we can measure all these things. Cycling's a very scientific sport, and something's got to improve that you can measure. And that's not going to happen unless you put in more work. What is the age-old phrase is if you, do the same thing over and over and over again, you're going to get the same results. So to get different results, you got to try something new, something different.
Yeah, and I think to kind of add on that, Justin, for a lot of working athletes, it can feel kind of daunting to look at a season and to look at maybe what different pro athletes are doing, or maybe even what some friends are doing, and to say, man, they've got this beautiful progression in their training volume where they start out and they progress all the way up to 15 hours, maybe even 20 hours. And you look at your time and you say, there's no way in the world I could progress like that. And they look at that and they say, well, basically I can't get better. And that's where I think it's important to say, there are a lot of different things you can do to get better, from maybe your aerodynamic position on the bike. Maybe your progressive element is, how long can you hold that, that aerodynamic position on your bike? And that doesn't have to, entail adding additional volume to your training. So there's lots of different areas to kind of pick apart to suss out some more performance improvements. But you have to make sure that you're identifying that, and that that you're also tracking it to ensure that you're making progress.
Absolutely, that's a good point. Aero position. A couple things here. You got Taya and Jeff on the stream with us. Patrick, Kev, Mitchell. So if you guys have any questions, you can let them fly in Facebook. We'll have Nate address them live. We've got a few more minutes in the group ride.
Just one more thing to jump in too, Justin, is that we talked about some of these core concepts, and there's lots of good resources for kind of how to bring in data and how to, utilize data to help to plan out a season. And we're building this presentation a little bit on training and racing with the Power Meter, the 9th chapter in that book. But there are a lot of different, a lot of other resources. Training Peaks has, a really great annual training plan builder, where, talking about the season planning process, where you can enter in different CTL targets based throughout the year. And it's a really cool tool that will enable you to kind of build out progression throughout the year and show you, different CTL targets on a weekly basis, working toward a monthly basis, and all kinds of dynamic stuff that you can do that. And so, even though we talked about some more of the basics, kind of core principles of designing a training plan, there are a ton of resources out there. And if you have, questions about those, or if you want to follow up with me afterwards, I can point you towards some of those resources. So if you're already kind of beyond this beginning point where you feel like, hey, I've got this down, I'm ready to get into, more of the core of utilizing data to plan a training plan, there's a lot of those great resources out there.
Absolutely. Got a question from Taya. Says, do you generally follow Joe Friel's approach to the different phases of training throughout the year?
So that's a really good question. So yeah, Joe Friel, kind of wrote the book on modern periodization when it comes to cycling, the Cyclist Training Bible. And I've read that book. It's a great book. And to answer that question, I'd say more directly, I would say, or maybe indirectly, I would say it depends. So it depends on all those different factors that we talked about in the presentation. So first of all, what are your goals? The second one would be what does your available training time look like? So if somebody is kind of capped at 6 to 8 hours a week, I would say I don't think that those general periodization principles make a lot of sense for the athlete that's capped at maybe 6 to 8 hours a week. And just to kind of get into that a little bit more specifically, is that if you can only ride 6 hours a week, does it make a lot of sense to do a lot of zone 2 riding at 6 hours a week? And what my personal response to that would be is that I don't think it does. I think you can probably design a training plan that works a little bit better for an athlete that's really time crunched, that utilizes their training time more effectively. Now, if an athlete had 20 hours a week, then I think that that general training periodization kind of model is much more applicable. So I think you have to look at what your goals are, what your available training time is, and then say, this is a periodization model that really comes from elite sport. So it comes from pro level sport, Olympic level sport. So we're talking about people who have training volumes that are flexible all the way up to 30 hours a week, 30 hours a week, to where their entire life is built around, supporting their training goals. So I think that there are lots of advantages to that type of periodization, but I'm not convinced that all of those advantages apply to an athlete who has much less time. So depends on how much time they have. I would say, I think that's the best way to start from that ground floor, and then to say, is there a more dynamic approach that might be more effective for an athlete that doesn't have a lot of time? And that would be my general approach to kind of applying those core principles, classic principles of periodization to an individual athlete.
It's interesting. So basically, you would take the framework and find the elements that this athlete can do. Basically, obviously, the full framework. If you had the time of a pro athlete, you could live it to its fullest. But as we pick apart the essential parts of that framework, like kind of what you said earlier with progression, it doesn't have to be time that you use for progression. It can be intensity, or it could be time spent in aero position, which isn't going to be 30 hours a week kind of thing, stuff like that. So
yeah, and I have, there's a presentation that we just did on our website, all about rest, over at datadrivenathlete.com, and that presentation really gets to this core question of how do you identify when to rest, and when is it appropriate to rest, when is it maybe not appropriate to rest, and it kind of jumps into this topic with a little bit more depth. But yeah, it's a great question, one that a lot of people tackle over. Is that you look at a book like that, and it's a classic book on periodization, and then the working athlete looks at that and they say, I can never progress my volume. All I've got is 6 hours a week. Like, that all looks nice on paper, but that's not practical for me. And if that's you, then I think that there's a better way to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we covered that question from Taya, you were talking a bit about the annual training plan tools in Training Peaks, and I want to give a quick plug there because I use several tools, and I think the one thing that hands and feet above any other software out there that Training Peaks really nails is forward planning. I had quick backstory when my first event that I picked out that I was going to do was the Seattle to Portland. It was a 200-mile event. I grabbed their PDF from their website. They kind of talked about mileage per week, and they had a progressive overload type system with the mileage. And I said, okay, if I want to get to 200 miles, if I follow that, I should be good. And then I started dealing with the constraints of what days am I going to do these things? Well, my days don't match what they prescribed. Okay, so now I'm at a spreadsheet. I'm interactively each week planning which days I'm going to do longer rides and shorter rides. And oh man, I had this appointment come up. And so, it worked for me. And then I was shown the calendar in Training Peaks where you can just move your workouts around from day to day, and it will automatically tally all the different weekly totals. It'll project your progression charts, like for your training, the word or the performance manager chart for your CTL. And so I think that is one of the features that is just, honestly, I've looked at other things, and I don't think anyone has anything as awesome as what Training Peaks has there. So they do offer a discount code for viewers of the show. If we don't make any money from you going and getting on software, but if you feel like it's something you want to peruse, they do offer a 20% discount for viewers of the show. Use the discount code ODZ20 or 20. Get yourself 20% off Training Peaks premiums. You have something to say, Nate?
Yeah, just kind of a further plug. So I've been using Training Peaks software for maybe close to 10 years now. And I think what impresses me most about Training Peaks software is that to date is that they've constantly improved, and they're really, really receptive to feedback. So they have a really tight feedback mechanism for coaches. And I've shared some feedback with them, and I was just at a Training Peak conference a couple months ago in Boulder, and I was talking with one of the representatives there, and I was like, it's amazing the stuff that I had talked about in terms of some of the I'd say some little pieces of efficiency within the training plan. They passed off to their team and they implemented, and they are I would say more than any other company in that space. I think they're constantly looking to improve and constantly looking to kind of refresh their product, and that's a lot of fun to be a part of that. So yeah, I don't get any money from Training Peaks. I send them a lot of money, so there's no there's no value in me saying that, except that I think they're a great company and they have an awesome software. And kind of getting to this point about planning for a season, if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed with some of those tools within Training Peaks, there are a lot of different resources that they have online to help kind of break down every single piece of their software and how you can apply those different layers to create something like what we're talking about, an annual training plan. And to do that, now it's not going to be something that you can just jump into and just it works right away. It's something that it's going to take an investment of time and of education to kind of learn about that. But all those resources are out there to really kind of get the full benefit from what they offer.
Absolutely. And one of a data point here that kind of shows how they are keeping up to date with what's coming out is they've released a feature. I haven't actually tried it myself, but I've read that it exists. When you plan your workouts in Training Peaks online, and if you have the workouts built there, as you can build them specifically with wattage targets and durations, have that planned out, and you connect it with Zwift. When you log into Zwift on that day, it will download that workout in the background and have it right there at your login screen for you. Just say, that's the workout I need to do today. Key that up, do it. And that saves a few steps. That's nice.
Yeah, so all my workouts are built in that format, and so my athletes, like you mentioned, it'll automatically plug right into Zwift, or on their Garmin, it'll automatically upload their workout for the day, and work you through each sequence of intensity targets. And then kind of getting back to this topic about planning out your workout. Also, when you build out workouts in that format, then you can model out time and you can look and see what your progression will be over time if you effectively follow that plan and nail those workouts to the plan. So there's that power of kind of keeping you on track, in terms of holding you to a target on that daily workout. And there's also that ability to look over time and to see if I effectively get these workouts done over the next month or however long you've planned out, this is where I can expect that my fitness might be. So there's a lot of really powerful kind of technology there to keep you on track on a daily basis and then keep you on track over time, over the course of a whole season.
Absolutely. And I think vital to that as well is the ability to roll with the punches as life happens. I steal that phrase, roll with the punches, from a piece of budgeting software that allows you to modify your budget as your priorities change through the month. But I think it's the same goes with our training plan, where family events happen, work schedules change, and what you planned 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago to do might no longer be valid. But it's just quick and easy. Oh, I need to shift my workout back. I don't know how it's going to affect my peak for my event that far out. But it's just drag it around, roll with the punches. Life's going to happen. We all know it. And it just makes it easy.
Yeah. And really quickly before we go, building on that, I would say that kind of brings up this point in my mind of don't be married to your plan, be married to your commitments, right? So the way that you answer that why train question, that's what keeps you going. But if you're married to the plan, chances are when you have some of those kind of inconsistencies in life, and when you kind of get derailed, then your whole season falls apart because you were so committed to that plan. So start with those kind of foundational elements and then build a plan that's flexible and acknowledge, be prepared for the fact that you're going to have to modify it, over the course of a season.
Great. We actually have another question that rolled in here from Alex Smith. As I got into Zwifting 12 weeks ago now, I did the 12-week FTP builder on there, and I went from 166 watts on my first test, 265 after the program. Just wondering where I should go here.
So first of all, congrats on on improving so much. The sobering news is that you'll probably never improve that much again. So it's awesome to start out and to see those improvements. It's incredible. It's incredible how the body can adapt. The fact that you could improve that much over, it's not like 12 weeks is from an exercise science standpoint, it's incredible to hear that. So in terms of where you should go from here, I would ask, and I would go back to those questions and I would say, well, what is it that you're training for? Are you looking to race? Are you looking to generally get in better shape? Are you looking to do, your first Grand Fondo, or, kind of sort out what some of those, what is it that drives you to continue to train? Initially getting on the bike, it might have been that you just love Zwift and you wanted to get better. But that might not continue to sustain your motivation over time. So I would say, what is it that you're interested in? And after you kind of build out some of those elements, then you might be able to take a closer look at what you should do from there. Because what you should do is going to depend on how much time you have, what your goals might be. If you're looking to jump into your first cross race, or if you're looking to do your first Grand Fondo, that's going to dictate what you should do from here. So go through that process that we talked about a little bit, and I think that might help bring some clarity in terms of what training plan might you pursue kind of going forward, or how might your training look differently based on what your goals are.
Great. Perfect.
But I would say this, if you can make another 100-watt improvement in your FTP, please send me an email. That kind of improvement is amazing, and you will no doubt continue to improve, but it will probably take a greater amount of focus, a greater amount of discipline to continue to progress than when you first hopped on.
But it doesn't take anything away from the fact that you did improve quite a bit, because
Absolutely.
Sticking to a 12-week plan, that part's hard actually. The 12-week plans Absolutely. Are not to be lightly tread upon. There's some serious work going on in there.
For sure, yeah. 12 weeks is a lot of commitment, a lot of focus. And to improve that much is an incredible accomplishment. So I would say, be excited about that, and begin to look forward and see what's next.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that is all the time we have for today. We appreciate everyone coming, all the questions. Nate, thank you so much for your time. Your advice and knowledge here is just priceless, and we really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us. So we are going to sign off. We'll be back on here next Wednesday, 6:30 a.m. Pacific as usual. That's 9:30 a.m. Eastern. If you enjoyed the content on the channel, go ahead and hit the like button. We've got lots of great content daily. We do normally have a skills and drills ride later today, but turns out there's some hurricanes that are actually affecting the ride leader for skills and drills, so we won't have skills and drills today. Hope Ian weathers the storm well and comes back for us next week. So once again, thank you so much, and we hope to see you on next time.